So lately, while I've been racking my head for ideas as I've been waiting for the Across the Spider-Verse Blu-ray to come out, yes, I'm addicted, I realized something. I have not read Jujutsu Kaisen in a while, and yet, despite that, I've seen so many people say that the series has fallen off and that it has yet to reach the same heights that it reached previously. And now that season 2 is currently airing, I thought that this was the perfect time to test whether that statement was true. So, I decided to farm the series for content, and I caught up with it. And spoilers for the Jujutsu Kaisen manga, obviously, but yeah, we got a lot to talk about here, so let's just get right into it, I guess. So I think the best way to start any video like this is to first talk about the biggest and most fundamental difference between the series' biggest arcs, which are the Shibuya incident and the Culling Games arcs. See, from the beginning of the series, everything was done in service of building up to the Shibuya incident, which is easily one of my favorite modern shonen arcs in recent memory because of that. The arc acts as the climax for many of the ideas and character dynamics that were set up during the first act of the series, such as Yuji's dynamic with Mahito, as well as the idea of taking the strongest character in Gojo out the series, which added another layer of tension to the arc and created a way to shake up the status quo for the Jujutsu world, because it created an environment where the main characters could no longer rely on Gojo to bail them out, given that he was their win button, and they instead have to rely on themselves. Needless to say, the Shibuya incident is consistently engaging and always finds a way to not only subvert your expectations, but also keep you constantly guessing as to what'll happen next. Compared to this, the Culling Games are a lot different, because while the arc was established as both a narrative and sort of thematic follow-up to the Shibuya arc, this isn't exactly the case for the Culling Games. Because even though all of the ideas in Shibuya were the result of a series worth of build-up leading up to that point, the Culling Games essentially have to start from scratch and building its own ideas that the arc then has to pay off either within the Culling Games themselves or through any arc that happens after. Now, while on paper, this isn't actually a problem in and of itself, the problem with the Culling Games and overall the series itself following the Shibuya incident is the pacing with which Gege chooses to speed through plot points and elements. I'm gonna be honest with you, if I was driving at the speed of which this series is paced at this point, I would probably just die. Like, bro, I am not Speed Racer. I cannot handle the Mach 6. I am finished. In all seriousness, Gege has this problem with pacing after the Shibuya incident, where he really starts to speed through plot elements that he himself had meticulously built up prior. And no one plot point in the series is more indicative of this problem than Maki's conflict with the Zenin Clan. If there was ever a point in Jujutsu Kaisen where this problem of pacing really starts to show itself, it's without a doubt the Perfect Preparations arc, which features Maki completely eradicating every single member of the Zenin Clan, as Gege fully embraces the idea of making her the present-day Toji Zenin. Now, while this idea was actually built up for a while, since even the Shibuya incident itself, where Megumi says that Toji is like Maki but fully realized, there was always going to come a point where Maki went head-to-head against the Zenin Clan in the matter that she does here, since the foundation of her character arc was built off of her wanting to tear down the conservative status quo of the Zenin Clan to build something new. But the idea is much different than the overall execution of this idea. Because, well, the arc is 5 chapters long. I don't think I need to tell you why that's a problem. When you establish the Zenin Clan as one of the 3 major families, one of the pivotal factions within Jujutsu society, it feels like a giant slap in the face to kill off basically every single major member of the Zenin Clan that you just established 10 chapters ago, in half of the amount of time that it would take to actually tell an arc like this in depth. Like, none of the Hei, the most powerful group of sorcerers within the Zenin Clan, receive any attention beyond being killed off by Maki in a single chapter. Besides the eye test, I don't know anything about these characters or how their curse techniques actually work. So truly, what was the point of building up the Zenin Clan only to portray them as complete cannon fodder for Maki to one-shot? And if we're talking disappointments and wasted potential, one of the two biggest disappointments of the entire series to me is Naoya Zenin, the original heir to the Zenin Clan and the leader of the Hei. To be honest with you, I can make an entire video on how Gege squandered the potential that Naoya had as an antagonist for Maki. Let me know if you want to see that, by the way. But the long and short of it is that, in theory, Naoya was interesting, at least to me, because he was the true failure of the Zenin Clan. More than Toji or Maki not being able to use curse energy, more than Mai not having a curse technique, Naoya was the greatest failure of the Zenin Clan because he embodied every negative quality that made the Zenin Clan despicable. He's misogynistic and views women as objects, he's entitled and self-centered, and gravely overestimates himself and his own strength, even going so far as to delude himself into thinking he is the only one who can stand at the apex with characters like Satoru Gojo and Toji, and eventually gets knocked off his pedestal and back to reality by the person he thought could never amount to anything and written off as another failure. See, on the surface, Naoya serves his role in the story by acting as the fuel for Maki's character development, both within her massacre of the Zenin Clan and even when he returns during the Culling Games. However, the squandered potential I'm referring to is the fact that his relationship with Maki, outside of seeing her as nothing but an object and even having been shown to physically abuse her in the past, the relationship is never fully explored. So the idea of Maki completely destroying Naoya in a fight and by extension destroying the clan whose toxic and conservative ideals stole her innocence falls flat. A lot of fights in Jujutsu Kaisen are honestly character driven rather than just being displays of combat excellence, such as Yuji's dynamic with Todo or Mahito, etc. There's a lot of ways that Gege could have handled this conflict, such as placing this later into the story and using Maki returning to the Zenin Clan as a way to plant the seeds leading up to her destroying the Zenin Clan, and taking that time to build Naoya's dynamic with Maki, given that she is one of the most important side characters in Jujutsu Kaisen. The best way I can illustrate my point is by using the aforementioned dynamic between Yuji and Mahito. From the moment Mahito was introduced, he functioned as sort of a direct foil to Yuji, and the Mahito arc served as a way to plant the seeds to their sort of rivalry that would span the series until Shibuya, where their dynamic reached its climax. I also think Gege could have taken the time to build that dynamic between Maki and her sister Mai as well, given that one of Maki's motivations post Shibuya tied into her desire to change the status quo of the Zenin Clan and wanting to build a place where Mai feels like she belongs. To be honest with you, I feel like a whole conversation or reconciliation regarding this newfound goal was left out. Or maybe you can even have them fight together during the Culling Games to better construct their dynamic. Or maybe even have the Zenin Clan participate in the Culling Games. I don't know. The point is, you can really see with the Perfect Preparations arc that Gege did not want to spend any more time writing this plotline, so he rushed through it. But it could have been so much more than what it was. Now, regarding the Culling Games themselves, originally I didn't really have a whole lot to say in the way of negatives, since some of the earlier fights in the arc I really enjoyed, such as Yuji vs Higuruma, Hakari vs Kishimo, and my personal favorite of the arc, Yuta vs Ryu and Uro. Yuji's fight with Higuruma has great character drama etched into it, with Higuruma being a jaded lawyer and Yuji being steeped in self-hatred due to Sukuna's killings at Shibuya. With Yuta vs Ryu and Uro, it's the first time since the prequel that we get to see Yuta go all out. And while I would say that Uro is one of the weaker characters of this fight, Ryu's depression over never having found true satisfaction in his life, as a result of never finding someone who could not only serve as his equal, but also push him past his limits, and then having Yuta serve as that equal was great storytelling and character writing for both Ryu and Yuta as well. We also got a triple domain expansion out of it, which is still the coolest thing ever. Gege, please don't end this series before we see what Yuta's domain expansion is. I am begging you. With Hakari vs Kishimo, it's honestly just pure hands. Kishimo trying to satiate his lust for battle and Hakari just trying to keep himself alive. I don't really have much to say here in the way of character writing, but the choreography for this fight was really fun, even if the fight itself got pretty ridiculous at times. I'm looking at you, Idle Death Gamble. Also, shoutouts to Hikari doing Michael Jackson poses during this fight. He's such a W. But from here on though, one of the Culling Games' biggest problems really starts to become noticeable, and how the arc kinda starts to become more redundant as we bounce from colony to colony. I'm gonna be honest with you, I genuinely believe that the Shibuya arc had more at stake than the Culling Games arc. At least that's how it felt, despite the Culling Games stakes being technically higher than Shibuya's. Because of this sense of redundancy between colonies, there's a lot of moments where the story feels like it's meandering, trying to regain its footing and create something engaging. And it gets to a point where you actively start hoping for Gojo to come back in order for things to become more engaging, whereas for Shibuya, it was the opposite. For all the reasons I mentioned earlier, I was not a fan of the Maki-Naoya grudge match because it really just highlighted the disappointments I felt regarding the Zenin Clan plotline. Funnily enough, this fight is one of my favorite chapters of the arc, where Maki just completely blows off her fight with Naoya to sumo wrestle. You'd think I'm kidding, but I am so serious when I say that dedicating an entire chapter to Maki's sumo wrestling was unironically good character writing, as it helped Maki to get over her inhibitions and allow her body to move on its own and reach that same sense of freedom that Toji had. This chapter really puts into perspective the idea of Toji being the one who was free, because prior to his second fight against Gojo, he did not allow his own intrusive thoughts to cloud his judgment or his movements, and thus was able to defeat Gojo the first time. And that same state of mind is what Maki is able to reach through trial and error, which was nice to me. Shame about the rest of the fight though. Also, Noritoshi Kamo was in that fight. I forgot about it immediately after this very chapter, but yeah, he was there. Moving on. The next fight of this arc, featuring Choso and Yuki Tsukumo fighting Kenjaku, is really where this arc started to lose me. I ain't got nothing bad to say about Choso, that's big bro, he can never do no wrong. My beef lies with Kenjaku and Gege's decision making regarding the character of Yuki Tsukumo. Now, when Yuki's character was first introduced to us, we were made aware that she was one of the strongest characters in the series, being one of only 4 special grade sorcerers in the Jujutsu world. When she made her first real appearance in the series, outside of flashbacks, in the Shibuya arc, it told us that things had gotten to a point where the strongest characters, like her, were forced to make their move and fully establish themselves within the story, giving us the opportunity to eventually learn more about her as a character from that moment forward. Well, I hate to tell you, but yeah, that's not what happened at all, because, yeah, I'm just gonna rip the band-aid off. Yeah, she just dies. Like, she puts up a good fight against Kenjaku, I guess. Actually knowing what her curse technique is makes sense for her to be a special grade sorcerer, given how strong it actually is in theory. But like, she gets beaten so bad to the point where she's forced to convert herself into a black hole just to get back on Kenjaku, which, you know, if you're gonna go out, I guess go out swinging, I guess. Kenjaku survives this, by the way, by using the can't believe I have to say this. Okay, here we go. The anti-gravity system.
Man, what the fuck is you talking about?
What the fuck was that?
I'm sorry, man. I wasn't thinking about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you, bro. I don't know what this means. Okay, like I do, but it took me like 20 minutes of actually staring at this panel to fully understand what this means. And to be honest with you, I don't even think Akutami understands what this means. Like, these literally read like words he just tacked on the panel to make Kenjaku surviving sound like it made some level of sense. But the way he words it, it feels like he doesn't even know what he's actually saying. Which, I'm about to deviate so heavily from the point about Yuki, because I gotta get this one off my chest, man. What is it with Gege and over-explaining curse techniques and domain expansions to the point that actually understanding some of these deadass makes you smarter than someone with a college degree? I am so serious. Like, I mentioned Hikari's idle death gamble earlier, and to be honest, I understand it way better than how I did when I first read it, but the way Gege laid the explanation of it out, my brain exploded when I first read it. Maybe my reading comprehension is at the level of a 3rd grader or something. I don't know. And the anti-gravity system? Yeah, somehow that makes even less sense to me than idle death gamble does. How that's even possible, I don't know. don't even get me started on Kyoto's curse technique, because we're gonna be here all day, I guarantee you. So anyway, back to my point on Yuki. Remember how I mentioned that Naoya was one of the 2 biggest disappointments in the series? Well, if you caught on, the other greatest disappointment of the series is Yuki Tsukumo. Like, it's so frustrating that we never got to learn any more about her as a character, because she just wasn't in the series until Shibuya, and even after that, she still just wasn't in the series at all due to the focus on the Culling Games. We never got to see more of her dynamic with Todo. Where is he, Gege? And to top it all off, she gets completely brutalized by Kenjaku. And her death isn't even like a Nanami type death, where Nanami's death actually hit emotionally because we knew who Nanami was as a character. We spent an entire arc building his dynamic with Yuji. This isn't the same as that. Yuki wasn't in this series. We don't know who she is as a character. So that's what makes that frustrating. It's so ironic to me that one of the greatest strengths of the series, being the female cast and its quality, is now one of its greatest weaknesses. Yuki getting killed off while we barely knew her, Nobara, one of the main trio by the way, pretty much being confirmed to be dead at this point and has been since the end of Shibuya, Hana getting her arm bitten off by Sukuna, useless Miwa just dicking around during the Culling Games, which, I'm going off topic again, what exactly was the point of this panel? Like, why did Gege just randomly toss in a panel of Miwa wandering around, and then the next time she appears after that, it's after the Culling Games, during the finale of the series? What was she doing there? And the worst of it is Yorozu, who was in this series for a staggering 8 chapters, and we barely learned anything about her connection to Sukuna or Megami's sister Sumiki, whose body she incarnated into. All we learn about this character is that she was in love with Sukuna, and that's it. Her backstory does nothing to explain who she is, how she fell in love with him, why, and to top it all off, she got killed off too, which not only killed Yorozu off, but Megami's sister as well. Did I forget to mention that Megami's sister is one of the driving forces of not only his character, but also one of the main reasons the group gets involved in the Culling Games? So basically, what this means is we have 2 characters we barely knew anything about in Sumiki and Yorozu, and both of them die immediately after being introduced into the story again, making some of the stakes of the arc feel pointless, and I can't do it. So, instead of me saying it, I'm gonna let a good friend of mine say it for me.
We need a case study. A intricate, detailed case study. Why do shonen mangaka hate bad bitches? Why are these shonen mangaka bad bitch-ophobic?
I said this earlier, but just to reiterate, because of how so many things in the Culling Games felt not only inconsequential, but also stale, especially considering the fact that Yuji just doesn't feel like the main character anymore, mainly because he doesn't have anything really to do. Things like Sukuna bodyjacking Megami, which brings the plotline of Sukuna's interest in Megami full circle, as well as Gojo finally getting released from the prison realm, really helped to make the series more engaging, because at this point, Gojo is more of the main character than Yuji is. I mean, what has Yuji actually done, and how has he developed as a character since the Shibuya incident? Regardless, moving on from the Culling Games, the most recent fight involving Gojo and Sukuna is, at least to me, one of the better fights the series has had in recent memory. Given how this fight was built up since the beginning of the manga, this fight feels exactly how it was advertised at the start. A clash of titans featuring the 2 strongest Jujutsu sorcerers in history. It's so cool seeing these 2 juggernauts just completely bend the rules to their will because of how strong they actually are. The choreography is stellar just like usual, but one massive complaint I do have rears back around to the pacing of this series. Once Gojo gets unsealed, we immediately head into the final battle. We don't see how the cast responds to Gojo after they unseal him. We don't see any real character building and relationship growth. The comedic aspect of this series is fucking gone, and if I told you certain characters were in this series at all, you would not believe me. All that aside, the current fight is still very fun, and no matter what, Satoru Gojo will always move mountains. So at the very least, Gege knows that his most hated character is enough to move the needle. Now, I feel like I've been extremely negative this whole video, but I genuinely hoped and still wish for Jujutsu Kaisen to reach the same heights that made it one of my favorite recent shonen. But unfortunately for me and the rest of the community, it feels like Gege just doesn't want to write this series anymore. It feels like he's lost the passion and love he once had when the series first started. And while that's not uncommon, especially within the manga industry, it's a damn shame that he wasted so much potential that the series had after the Shibuya incident. I don't think it's possible for Gege to course correct because, like it or not, this fight with Gojo and Sukuna, and whatever happens after, it's the end of the line. And I just wish Gege still cared about the series the way that the rest of us do, but it is what it is. Also, I forgot to mention that, Yuki had a domain expansion. We never got to see it because she died. Even worse, we saw Yoruzu's domain expansion before we saw Yuki's. One more time.
Bad bitch of phobic.